In this video, I want to address the insanity defense issue. And once again, most of this is from my new book, The Common Sense Ethics of a Blue-Collar Philosopher. To begin with, the so-called insanity defense is just another piece of the modern-day irresponsibility puzzle. It's yet another reason why America is destroying itself from within through not holding people accountable for their actions. Insanity? Give me a break. Are the overwhelming majority of these people insane? Not even close. Can the overwhelming majority tell right from wrong? Absolutely. But even those who cannot still know what I call the do's and don'ts of society. A person who's truly insane would not only not be able to distinguish between right and wrong, they wouldn't be able to distinguish between the do's and don'ts of the society they live in. In fact, it would be impossible for them to make it into adulthood without both knowing and understanding the do's and don'ts of their society. So what do I mean by the do's and don'ts of society? I mean a multitude of actions, such as pushing someone down to get what you want, grabbing a hot dog off a hot dog stand without paying for it, simply because you want it, driving a car on the wrong side of the road, taking cuts and going to the front of a line, walking up to a beautiful woman and groping her just because you want to, driving off with someone's car because you like it, eating groceries because you're hungry as you're shopping, etc. The examples are endless. How could insane people go through life without doing any of these things if they cannot distinguish between the things they can do and the things they cannot do in society? It could not be done. If a human being knows there are things they can do in society and things they cannot do in society, they cannot be insane, period. So even if they don't understand why something is right or wrong, they certainly do know what they can get away with and what they cannot get away with. Thus, they are still making a conscious decision. Thus, they can be held accountable for their actions even if they don't understand why something is right or wrong, because they did know that society does not allow them to do it. Look at it like this. A dog certainly doesn't know right from wrong, but he certainly does know what it can get away with and what it cannot get away with in relation to its owner. Even though it has limited intellect, it still learns what it can and cannot get away with. This is why the saying, "you can't teach an old dog new tricks," is so popular. Once a dog has learned the do's and don'ts of its owner, it's extremely difficult to change the paradigm that has been instilled into it. My point being, once again, if a human being knows he can and cannot get away, or what he can and cannot get away with in a social setting, he cannot be insane, period. As to temporary insanity, the rule still applies. It's yet another part of modern America's excuse-making industry. In essence, it's just another way of not holding people accountable for their actions. Not only that, but both defenses are so arbitrary that neither one of them could ever possibly be applied equally or objectively under the law. For a couple of examples, I want to go back a few years to some famous cases so people know who I'm talking about. The examples I'll be using will be Jeffrey Dahmer, Lorena Bobbitt, and Andrea Yates. Let's begin with a question. Who's insane? Or better yet, tell me who's more insane. A man who eats people, Jeffrey Dahmer, a woman who cuts off her husband's penis because he's selfish and won't please her sexually, Lorena Bobbitt, or a mother who drowns her own 5 children one by one in her own bathtub, Andrea Yates. Well, according to our legal system, a man who eats people is sane. A woman who cuts off her husband's penis because he's selfish and won't please her sexually is insane. And a mother who drowns her own 5 children one by one in the bathtub is sane. Does anyone see anything wrong with this picture? If a human being eating people in modern America is not considered insane, what the hell is? Tell me what actions a person could possibly take that are more insane than eating people. Of course, in some ancient cultures, cannibalism wasn't seen as insane, and even under dire circumstances, it might not be seen as insane. But we're talking about modern America. It's about as insane as it gets. And how about Lorena Bobbitt? This woman cuts off her husband's penis because he only cared about pleasing himself in bed. But by telling this to the police, it completely wipes out her insanity defense because it shows that she gave thoughtful reason to her deed. Of course, it's not a good enough reason, but it certainly is a good enough reason to show she wasn't insane. But let's look at it from this case from another angle for a moment. Let's say a man cuts out his wife's vagina because she only cares about pleasing herself in bed. This man could be the most insane person on the planet, but he would still spend the rest of his life in prison for what he did. This case showed the huge double standard as to how men and women are sometimes treated in courts of law. It also exposed a huge double standard as how men and women are treated in the media as well. If a man cut out his wife's vagina, the media would have been completely outraged that a human being could commit such a heinous act. But how was the story covered in the media when a man gets his penis cut off? It was barely even taken seriously. Whenever the story was told, there was always an underlying sense of amusement about it, even in serious news reports. And everyone else had a field day with the story. Even a decade after the fact, people were still telling jokes about it. Please tell me just one joke you've heard about a woman having her vagina cut out, or even females in Africa having their vaginas mutilated. This happens thousands of times a year in Africa, so where are all the jokes? There are no jokes because it's not funny. But it's also not funny when it happens to a man either. And the fact that it was joked about for years just shows a huge double standard. Last but not least, there was Andrea Yates. If you remember, Andrea Yates was deemed competent, sane, to stand trial. Now, I don't care what anyone says. A mother who can drown her 5 children one by one in her bathtub has some serious psychological problems. If this woman was not temporarily insane, who was? But once again, I'm not saying she shouldn't be held accountable for her actions, only that if there is such a thing as temporary insanity, the dictionary definition should read, look under Andrea Yates. 95% of the time, the insanity defense is a joke. And the only fact I need to point out to prove it is that if these people were truly insane, they could have never made it through their lives without continually violating the rights of their fellow citizens. They may not know why something is right or wrong, but they must know the do's and don'ts of society, or they could have never made it into adulthood, period. And so they can't truly be insane. Thanks for your time.